So today we're going to cover chapter 4 on dependent clauses. We finished the 4 types of verbs, which basically finishes the major elements of any sentence. And so now we're going into a bit of a wider view, moving away from words to the larger grammatical constructions of a sentence. And we've dealt with phrases prior, but now we're going to deal with clauses. So at the very beginning of chapter 4, we have dependent clauses, and we have 2 definitions. The first is the definition of a phrase. The second one, a definition of a clause. What is a clause? Memorize these 2 definitions. A phrase is a group of words without a subject and verb used as a single part of speech. So we've done phrases before. We've done prepositional phrases and verb phrases. Notice a group of words. So this is the genus that we're looking at. And both of these definitions share this. So a clause is a group of words with a subject and a verb. So we have a similarity between both definitions, group of words. And then we have a difference. The difference is that a phrase is without a subject and verb, whereas a clause is with a subject and verb. Now, a phrase also acts as a single part of speech, and we're going to also see that some clauses act as single parts of speech. An example of a phrase, a prepositional phrase, for instance, in the house. There's no subject here, and there's no verb. Another type of phrase which can cause some confusion is the verb phrase. So for instance, had run. This is a group of words. It has a verb, run, as well as a helping verb, had, but it doesn't have a subject. So in these definitions where she says without a subject and verb, it can have a subject and it can have a verb, but it can't have both. That's what makes a phrase. So that's a key thing here. Now, clauses that you've come in contact with many times, the title of this book, Rex barks. Rex is the subject, barks is the verb. This whole thing, Rex barks, is a clause. And so now you know that the basic sentence is also a clause. Here, in this case, it's an independent clause. But there are other types of clauses. For instance, when the rain stops. This is not a complete sentence, and this is a dependent clause. So when, we're going to learn shortly, is a subordinating conjunction. But we have our subject, rain, and we have our verb, stops. So this is a group of words that has a subject and a verb. Therefore, it's a clause. Rain is the subject, stops is the verb. So this is simple enough. Now, if we continue, she says, you have already said 2 kinds of phrases, the verb phrase, a main verb and all its helpers. Example, Rex has been chasing cars. So we just covered that. Prepositional phrase, a preposition, its object, and any modifiers of the object. For example, Rex ran through the dark woods. Through the dark woods is our prepositional phrase. Through is our preposition. Dark and the are our adjectives. They're the modifiers of woods, which is the object of our preposition. So woods is the object of the preposition. And through is our actual preposition, whereas the and dark are the modifiers of the object of the preposition, woods. We know that the object of the preposition has to be a noun or pronoun. Notice that a verb phrase has no subject within it, right? We just mentioned this. But a sentence also always has a subject and a verb. So every sentence you have studied so far has been a clause. And we're going to see that there are 2 types, main and independent. That means you have already been studying one kind of clause, the main or independent clause, a group of words with a subject and verb that can stand alone. So now we're going to split up clauses into their different types. And the first type is the main clause. The second type, the dependent or subordinate clause. Subordinate basically means the same as dependent. So the main and independent clause, it has a subject and a verb, just like the dependent clause, with a subject and a verb. And the dependent clause, if we look at that definition, dependent or subordinate clause, a group of words with a subject and a verb. So again, we have with a subject and a verb that cannot stand alone and that is used as a single part of speech. So a couple differences here. They both, what are the similarities first? They both have with a subject and a verb. The difference is a main and independent clause or independent clause can stand alone, whereas the dependent clause cannot stand alone. And it's used as a single part of speech. So a dependent clause is similar to a phrase in that both cannot stand alone and both act as single parts of speech. So that means that we have a phrase and a dependent clause. They're both groups of words. They both cannot stand alone, and they both act as single parts of speech. The difference between a phrase and a dependent or subordinate clause is one key thing. The subordinate dependent clause has a subject and a verb. So this allows us to actually come up with an easy way to distinguish between all three. So for instance, if I take the qualities, so we have groups of words. Subject plus verb. Does it have a subject and a verb? Second thing, can it, let's actually put these down here. Can it stand alone? And the third thing, does it act as a single part of speech? Now let's take the phrase. It's a group of words, does not have a subject and a verb. Put a little X here. Does not have a subject and the verb. It cannot stand alone, but it acts as a single part of speech. We'll put a plus here. So it acts as a single part of speech. Now, if we take the dependent clause or subordinate clause, let's put dependent clause. It does have the subject and verb. It cannot stand alone. And it acts as a single part of speech. Finally, if we take the independent clause, what is normally the sentence, first, does it have a subject and a verb? Yes, it does. Does it stand alone? Yes, it does. Does it act as a single part of speech? For now, we're going to say no. There's some instances where this is not the case, but we'll talk about those later. So this is a quick and easy chart to use when distinguishing between all three. And it's a test that you can use as well. So for instance, let me take a group of words, any group of words. For instance, had been running. Had been running. Okay, had been running. Does it have a subject and a verb? Just has a verb, so it doesn't have a subject and a verb. Just a verb. Does it stand alone? No, you need a subject. Is it a single part of speech? Yes, it's a verb. So this is a phrase, and it's a verb phrase, right? We can even say the tall man. Does it have a subject and a verb? No. Does it stand alone? No. I haven't said anything about the tall man. Is it a single part of speech? Yes, it's a noun with its modifiers. Now for a dependent clause, let's say I have when Rex barked. Does it have a subject and a verb? Yes, Rex is the subject, barked is the verb. Does it stand alone? No. When I say when Rex barked, right, I'm waiting for a response. I'm waiting for a more. When Rex barked, what? What happened? I'm waiting for more information. Is it a single part of speech? Yes, depending on where it is or how it is acting in the sentence. Most likely here it's going to be, well, it will be, excuse me, an adverb clause because it begins with subordinate conjunction when. We'll learn about this shortly. So this is for sure a dependent clause, and it matches these three qualities. What about an independent clause? Just Rex barked. Does it have a subject and a verb? Yes. Does it stand alone? Yes, that's a complete sentence. Is it a single part of speech? No. It has a noun, subject, and a verb. So it's not a single part of speech. So if you use this chart, you can test any group of words to decide whether it is a phrase, dependent clause, or independent clause. Let's go back to the book now. For an overview of phrases and clauses, you may wish to look at the appendix. There's a nice little appendix to look at. She doesn't cover every single type of phrase, and you can Google different types of phrases. We're going to see that there are multiple types of clauses, okay? And we'll go through them one by one. It is a good idea to keep reviewing the total picture, but now we must dig into the specifics. May we assume that you understand that a sentence always includes at least one main clause, for a sentence is a group of words with a subject and verb expressing a complete thought. So this is one definition of a sentence. Sorry. For a sentence is a group of words with subject and verb expressing a complete thought. This is one of the definitions of a sentence that you can use. This is also where we learn what a sentence fragment is. A sentence fragment is a sentence that is missing either a subject or a verb, or you just have a dependent clause and no independent clause. Okay, but we'll cover that more later on. But now we must learn about groups of words with subject and verb that cannot stand alone. So if you're paying attention, that is the what kind of clause? The dependent clause. Why does our language need such construction? Let us think back to our study of modifiers. We found we need more information about our subjects and verbs. First, we studied one-word modifiers. Rex barked yesterday. Yesterday here is a one-word adverb answering when. And we see that you can put many different adverbs for a verb. You can move the adverb or what as well. You can say yesterday Rex barked. It'd still be doing the same thing. But suppose we wanted to be more specific. Rex barked in the afternoon. Here we've used a prepositional phrase. This prepositional phrase, this is review, this prepositional phrase is acting as an adverb. It has the preposition, the noun, object, the object of the preposition, and the adjective the modifying the object. And this, as I mentioned, this whole phrase is used as a single part of speech. So now she gives us a third example. Rex barked when the mailman came. When the mailman came. When the mailman came is also answering a question. It answers the question, just like up here, yesterday, answered the question when, in the afternoon, answered the question when the mailman came, I mean, the question is, the word when is already in the clause, but when the mailman came answers when. And we look at it, what does it have? It has a subject, the mailman, has a verb, came. Does it stand alone? Try it. When the mailman came. Is that a complete sentence? No, you're waiting for something else. So is it being used as a single part of speech? This is where some people may get confused. This whole clause, when the mailman came, is acting as a single part of speech. It is acting as an adverb. Though it has parts, has when, which we're going to learn is a subordinating conjunction. It has mailman, which is the subject and the modifier, the, and the verb came, though it has all these individual parts, the whole, when the mailman came, that whole thing is acting as an adverb. And this is a dependent clause. This is how we know it is a dependent clause. She gives us a list with has a subject and verb. Number 2, cannot stand alone, try it. And 3, that is used as a single part of speech, an adverb that answers when. So in order to identify these, there are going to be some clues that we'll learn along the way, but one of the easiest ways is to ask yourself, what question is this clause answering? And then you'll know if it's an adjective or adverb clause pretty quickly. So let's review. When did Rex bark? Yesterday. This is an adverb. When did Rex bark? In the afternoon. An adverb phrase. When did Rex bark? When the mailman came. An adverb clause. Here we see there are 3 different types of adverbs: a single word, a phrase, or a clause. Were you bothered to see a prepositional phrase called an adverb phrase or a dependent clause called an adverb clause? That is just like saying, I am from the USA and I am from Virginia. One is a unit contained within another. Thus, prepositional phrases can be adverb phrases or adjective phrases. Dependent or subordinate clauses can be adverb clauses, adjective clauses, or noun clauses. We're going to go over all 3 of these in detail. By the way, let's not worry about dependent and subordinate. They mean the same thing, and the terms are interchangeable. Okay, if you ever heard of someone's subordinate, it means someone under them. So they listen to that person. If you're in the military, your officer, he's the leader. And then under him are subordinates, people who have to listen to him and obey him. And it's the same thing with sentences. You have clauses that are main or independent, mean the same thing, and then things that are dependent or subordinate. They rely on that main and independent clause to complete the meaning of the sentence. That's what's key. It's to complete the meaning of the sentence. That's what we mean by dependency and independency. Now, there's an easy way to visualize this. Again, if we clear this, we can say that groups of words can be divided into 2 main types. There is the groups of words that do not have subject and verb. So these are phrases, right? No subject plus verb. And there are different types of phrases. The one that we've learned so far, we've learned a couple. Prepositional phrases. And then we've also learned the verb phrase, and I mentioned a few others, but we don't have to worry about them too much at the moment. Verb phrase. And the prepositional phrases, from what we've learned earlier, can be two types. Adjective, put that for short, and adverb. Then there's another group of words which has a subject and verb, clauses. It has subject plus verb. There are also two general types of clauses. There's the independent clause, which stands alone. And then there is the dependent clause, which does not stand alone. And acts as a single part of speech. And so we have three different parts of speech that the dependent clause can act as. Independent clauses never act as, well, there's always some place where the rules of grammar break. But for now, we'll say independent clauses don't act as a single part of speech. Dependent clauses do. They can be adverbs, which we'll cover first. Adjectives, which are a bit tricky. And noun. So a dependent clause can be a noun clause. Okay, so if you have this chart down, you know the main phrases and clauses. You know all the clauses. There are just some other phrases that we can learn later on. So going back, next we're going to cover adverb clauses, 4a, and then which includes elliptical clauses, as well. Afterwards, we'll then cover adjective clauses, which are a bit of a doozy, and finally, the noun clauses.